This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Atlassian, the makers of Jira, Confluence, HipChat, and Bitbucket, helping teams everywhere team up to create what's next. Visit Atlassian.com to learn more. And by Macstock Conference and Expo and the Midwest Mac Barbecue, set for July 16 and 17 in Woodstock, Illinois. Join me, along with Melissa Davis, the Mac Mommy, Jody Spangler of Lakeshore Mac, technologist Kirshen Sia, and Wally Cherwinski of Magic 22. Find out more and register to attend at macstock2016.com. Welcome to Mac Voices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's been a long time since we talked to Joe Kissell, and that can only mean one or two things. Either he's been in a coma or he's been really busy. Or both. Or both, and I'm kind of betting on the second one. Joe, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for returning with all kind of goodies.
Sure, yeah. Well, you know, as you say, silence can mean only one thing. I've got my nose to the grindstone, and ouch. Yeah. And so there's a batch of new stuff to talk about today, and there will be more before long.
So we've got a lot of stuff to talk about here, but we're going to start with the new book, which is Speeding Up Your Mac, a Joe on Tech Guide.
Right on.
And this is, what is this? How many Joe on Tech Guides are there now? Four?
There are four right now. The initial arrangement was there were these four books that were take control books. Backing up your Mac, is take control of backing up your Mac, maintaining your Mac, troubleshooting your Mac, speeding up your Mac. Those four books I adopted to revise and republish under my own brand because they were just getting really old, really outdated, but they were great books, and a lot of people still really wanted their content, and unfortunately there just wasn't time in the Take Control publishing schedule to keep all of those books updated, and so they were just going to die. And I just said, let's not let them die. I'll take them. So I have taken them under my own brand. I revised them fully. I hired my own editor, my own tech reviewer, my own cover artist, all that stuff. I've republished them myself under my own imprint, but they're basically they're like new editions of the old books, only they're totally up to date and they have a future. So I'm really pleased to be able to do this. We've talked about the three other books in the past, and today finally we have the fourth book in that series. There will be more Joe and Tech books in the future, but this is sort of the fourth of this initial batch that I have. Like, I started this a year ago. And when I started, I thought I'd be, publishing a new book every 2 months, and that happened for the first three, and then life occurred, and I encountered some delays, and sorry. So now we're I don't want to say past that, but we have overcome at least the hurdle of getting this book out.
Yeah, it's funny how that whole life thing just keeps interrupting all the projects, but it does.
Yep.
And I'm really excited about this book simply because we're all craving that speed. We're all craving that step up, and sometimes it means a new machine, but sometimes it just means doing things a little bit differently or maintaining it, or all kind of other tips that you're going to deliver to us in this book. So
yeah.
Let's go. Speed up my Mac.
Yeah, so let's start with what you mentioned, which is buying a new Mac. So that's always a good choice if you want more speed, except it's expensive and also kind of often a hassle moving all your stuff over to the new Mac. It's going to happen eventually. I mean, I have a few Macs in this room. The one I am talking to you on, honestly, it's getting really long in the tooth. It's functional. I mean, I can write books on it and I can have video chats and stuff, but it's a 2010 iMac. And so even with all my tricks, which clearly help, I mean, don't get me wrong, they do help. I think this Mac's days are numbered. And so I'm just going to start with that. There's magic, and then there's magic. Like, there's well, I won't get into too many analogies from Game of Thrones, but anyway, you can. There are limits to the magic. But having said that, the basic premise of this book is like you buy a new Mac. Okay, it happened last year or 5 years ago or whenever, and you set up. It's like, wow, everything's so fast. Like windows are opening and apps are running so fast, and everything's just, it's great. And you're like, man, this is terrific. I'm so glad I got a new Mac. And then some time passes, maybe a year goes by, and you're like, it feels a little bit not quite so peppy. It feels like it's starting to, things are taking a little bit longer. Is it my imagination? Or is something really slowing down? And it's a very gradual thing. And over time, you start realizing, yeah, man, I'm sure this app didn't used to take a whole minute to open, but now it's taking like a minute. And, and backups are taking longer, and starting up is taking longer, and this thing is slower, and, Safari tabs aren't loaded, and whatever. And then totally coincidentally, right around that time, Apple will introduce new Macs, and you'll go, "Oh, new Mac, price of a new Mac." So it's always that thing where, of course, who doesn't want the shiny new thing? But also, like, it feels kind of wrong in a way. Like, this Mac was fast, so why couldn't it be at least as fast as it was before? Like, there are limits to technology, but like, you're not going to magically make the CPU of 10-year-old Mac run at 4 gigahertz, but it should be able to be as fast as it was before. So that is the main focus of this book, is undoing the stuff that has caused this gradual decline into sluggishness. Now, there are some ways of even boosting it past that, but the main thing is figuring out what has gone wrong over time and fixing it.
That's terrific. I know I've had that experience, and I'm sure you have, at least as part of the book, of for whatever reason needing to just wipe a Mac clean and do a fresh install before you load any apps or anything, and it's shocking sometimes how much speed you get back just by doing that. But then you have to load the apps back in and restore or whatever, and sometimes you bring the junk back with you, or at least you bring the speed decrease back with you. Maybe is a better way to say it. So I'm hoping you can solve that problem for me.
It is a multi-dimensional problem. So let's talk about what you just brought up, which is the junk. So that clearly is a big part of the problem. One of the things I talk about in the book is that you have to sort of be aware of these 3 different things at once. Like, what is affecting your CPU, where the actual processing is happening, what is affecting your RAM, where stuff is stored while it's being used, and what's affecting your disk or SSD. So all those different components of your Mac sort of, they work together in a lot of different ways, and they all have certain effects on speed. So even if you have like a super fast CPU and loads of RAM, if you have disk problems, whether it's a malfunctioning disk, like actual disk errors, or you have a disk that is almost completely full and there's just no breathing room on it, or you have various other issues going on with your disk. You've mistakenly booted up from a USB 2.0 hard drive. Things with your disk can really affect your Mac speed. Then again, the opposite is also true. You have like a super fast SSD, loads of free space, but also you have 50 apps open, and each of your 3 browsers has 50 tabs or windows open, and you're just really sort of assaulting your CPU. And Apple has done a lot of great things in recent versions of OS X to sort of reduce the background burden. So like you put Safari in the background, and hopefully whatever isn't actively on the screen, in the foreground, is not chewing up a lot of your CPU power as it used to do. But there are apps and browser extensions and things that are not well behaved, and not all browsers do this sort of trick, and certainly not all apps do. So it's so easy in OS 10 to have lots and lots of apps open, lots and lots of documents, windows, and tabs, and it's easy to lose track of what effect that might be having. Not to mention the fact that like all those little doohickeys up in your menu bar, of which I have. I have so many that I installed this app called Bartender, which sort of puts them on a sub menu, and like I don't know, there are dozens up there. All of those and other things represent processes that are running in the background all the time. You might have backups running, which backups are great. You might have utilities running. You might have monitoring tools, whatever. And these things are all useful. They're good. They do stuff that you want to have happen. I'm not saying you should turn all those things off, but you have to be aware that there is a cumulative cost to them. So at least what you should be thinking about is, can I turn off the ones I don't actually actively use? Or can I, fiddle with the settings a little bit so that they are not taking up so much of my Mac's processing power? So those are just sort of a couple of starting points for the exploration.
I'm so glad you brought up the menu bar apps. There's so many applications that now, we have a menu bar app. And I've often wondered how much CPU is that chewing up. I go into Activity Monitor and it doesn't look like much. But on the other hand, I do, you start to see the Mac slow down just a little. And of course, we have these super fast Macs now, and none of us thought we could ever slow them down. But you get really addicted to that, to the responsiveness and the speed. And so I love the fact that, you're suggesting maybe take a look at some of those and pay attention, because if you don't need them, then why do you have them running and cluttering up your menu bar?
Yeah, so I want to make a couple of points about what you just said. First of all, it is true. Like, you go into Activity Monitor and you say, well, this is only using up 1% of my CPU. And these other 99 things are also only using up 1% of my CPU each. And so, it's not about the 1%, but it's about, the cumulative effect. So that's part of it. But on the topic of Activity Monitor, so one of the things that kind of irritated me when I started working on the original version of this book long ago was that I would do web searches for performance enhancing tricks for your Mac, and I found tons and tons of tips for increasing your Mac speed. But most of the websites and books and other resources were just like, well, I don't know, this worked for me, try this. And I don't know, this seemed to maybe work for me, try this. And it's just like, try this. And you can try a bunch of things and maybe they work, maybe they don't. Maybe you've tried a bunch of things and your Mac is now faster, but you're not sure which of the things that you tried had an effect, or how much of an effect, or was it just coincidental that in the process of applying this tip, I also restarted, and actually the restart was what did it. Like, so I don't like randomness. I like science. So my approach is, let's not guess. I mean, yes, there are quick fixes, like restarting often will give your Mac a little quick boost. And there are a lot of other things that are sort of in that category of just a quick fix and you do it and you're done with it. Those are fine. But if you actually want to get at the root of what is happening, you have to do some investigation. Activity Monitor is one of the tools that you can use to do that. And it's built into OS 10, so it's there, it's free, and I explain how to use it to figure out what is using up your CPU power and your RAM and your disk and your network, and then what to do with that information once you've figured that out. So that's a good tool. There are others. There are lots of third-party tools that will monitor different stuff happening on your Mac in real time, so you don't have to like open up the Activity Monitor app and do a lot of sorting and stuff. It'll just say, oh, wanted to let you know this process is frozen, or this process is using up too much of whatever, and you can sort of take action appropriately. But certainly instead of just saying, wow, my Mac is slow, being able to say, oh, well, yeah, of course, my backup app is running right now. And also this is so obvious that makes sense. Those three things are what's slowing my Mac down right now. So actually, it'll be fine in 5 minutes once those are done. It was just coincidence. That's That's one thing. But I also recommend another step, which is actually measuring stuff. So you can use your watch. This is a Timex. It cost me about $20 about 20 years ago.
No Apple Watch?
It has taken a licking, but it's still ticking. I will talk about the Apple Watch on another occasion.
Okay.
Anyway, so you might use like the second hand on your watch or a stopwatch, I have somewhere around here an actual physical stopwatch, a mechanical stopwatch. Or you can use benchmarking apps. And I talk about some of these in the book and they're really simple. It sounds like this very complicated thing, but it's not. You open this app, you click a button, you wait a couple minutes, and it gives you a number. That's benchmarking. It's super crazy easy. But the point is, you do the benchmarking, or you do the timing of particular activities, and then you go try something. One of my tricks, or somebody else's trick that is alleged to solve a problem, and then you measure again, and you say, well, there was a 1% improvement. I'm not really sure that was even related. That could have just been random. Or it's like, oh wow, that this thing is now 15% better than it was. So clearly that did have an effect. And the idea is you make a measurement, you change one thing, not a bunch of random things. You change one thing, and then you test again, and you compare the numbers. And by doing this iteratively, you can figure out what the thing or things are that were slowing you down, and which of the potential activities to speed them up are actually effective. And then, armed with this information, you can make better decisions in the future. So a year from now, when that thing is being slow again, you can say, oh, well, remember I did that test and I tried this thing and it totally didn't work, but I did this other thing, this had an effect, and so now you know what to do in the future.
This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Atlassian, the makers of Jira, Confluence, HipChat, and Bitbucket, helping teams everywhere team up to create what's next. Visit Atlassian.com to learn more. Today, I want to tell you a little more about Atlassian's project management software, Jira. With Jira, you and your team stand a much better chance of shipping your software on schedule because you will have a clear, detailed understanding of where your project is at any given time in the development stage. Create user stories and issues, plan sprints, and distribute tasks across the team. Prioritize those tasks so everyone can see them, and make sure everyone is on the same page with the real-time visual reporting. You can choose a workflow within Jira or create your own, since your project is unlike anyone else's, right? That's the beauty of Jira. It can be used the way you want to use it, not the way someone else thinks your project should be organized. Of course, Jira integrates with Atlassian's other terrific software, including Confluence, HipChat, and Bitbucket, to deliver a full set of services for you and your team. And don't forget about the Jira iPhone app, because not all work gets done at the office. Want to see what Jira can do for you? Visit Atlassian.com and download a 7-day free trial. I think you and your team will be convinced. That's Jira, the #1 software development tool used by agile teams, made by Atlassian. Go to Atlassian.com for more information on Jira and all their great tools for teams, and put Atlassian to work for you. Thanks to Atlassian for their support of MacVoices. Okay, so I want to make sure we don't get away from the speeding up my MacBook, but I have the feeling that some of what you recommend in speeding up your Mac also has benefits with some of the other updates to the books, like maintaining your Mac. And I'm kind of curious as to how you marry those two together, and should I be doing things that to maintain my Mac that will speed it up, or should I do things for speeding up my Mac that will maintain my Mac?
Right. So we have these three topics: the maintaining, the troubleshooting, the speeding up, which have a certain amount of overlap. I mean, less than you might imagine, but there is certainly some. So let me just say, disk utility shows up in all three books. It almost has to. Activity monitor shows up in all three books. Now, I'm talking about sort of different things and different usages, but there are things that you will do to monitor your Mac's health that are applicable to ongoing preventive maintenance. that are also applicable to troubleshooting general problems and, again, applicable to solving speed problems. So there is, there are certainly common themes. I think, like, the utilities I mentioned, Activity Monitor and Disk Utility, as well as third-party monitoring tools. Certainly, you will, and let's not forget backups, which are kind of a big deal in all these different places. So you will become increasingly familiar with them the more of these books you read. Maintaining your MacBook is really about prevention. So it's really things that you can do to keep problems from occurring, including problems that will later cause your Mac to slow down. Troubleshooting is about solving problems that have occurred. And yes, one of those problems is a general slowness. And it's more like, oh, by the way, here's a couple of quick things you can do if your Mac feels too slow. But really, in the troubleshooting book, I talk about so many different problems, and general speed problems are just this much of it. And I say, I have this whole other 200-page book on the speed problem. So troubleshooting is way, way broader than just speed issues, although, there is some overlap there.
I think what I was thinking about when I asked the question is some of the utilities like Cocktail and Onyx that you can run that will ostensibly clear out caches and perform maintenance that sometimes, they seem to speed up your Mac depending on how bad your Mac was to start with. Sometimes they seem to have no effect, which I assume means that my Mac was not as dirty as I thought it was. So where do you stand on those?
Well, yeah, sure. I talk about apps like those, like Clean My Mac, and this whole topic of, clearing. So you brought up clearing caches, and I talk about clearing caches in the book. And the context of that discussion is sort of things you might have heard of that people say you need to do to speed up your Mac that could kind of be myths. And they all have a certain kernel of truth to them. It's not that clearing caches is always universally a bad idea. That's not so. But caches, the intention, the design of caches is to speed up your Mac. That is what they are there for. They are there to make things faster. So when you load, an example would be your Safari cache. You go to a web page, Safari stores a copy of like the graphics, let's just say, so that the next time you go to that same page, Safari doesn't have to download all those graphics again, which could be slow. We're just going to read them in off of disk. So the theory behind caches is that they will actually speed up things, that they are a good thing, and that if you delete them, then that can make all these processes take longer because they have to be redone from scratch. Now, it is also true that sometimes things go wrong with caches. The data that has been cached has an error in it, or it's corrupted. So in the process of trying to read in the cache, your Mac kind of goes, to do this data, and it sort of slows down. Another thing that can happen is that if you have an app that hasn't really thought through the caching very well, and these exist, it's like, over the years, I have cached all this data, and so every time I launch, I'm going to load in all this data, even though I'm only going to use this much of it. And so the app actually spends so much time reading in this massive cache that it takes longer than it would have to just, regenerate the information from scratch. So I'm saying that you have to be a little bit careful. You don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but in certain situations, things like caches can slow you down, and you can be very selective about those. So I got this email like yesterday from someone who was interested in the book, and they're like, I heard that or I remember from the past that zapping your PRAM is a really good way to speed up your Mac. And I was sort of like, so first of all, it hasn't been called PRAM in years and years. It's now NVRAM, non-volatile RAM. But you still do the same thing to clear it. You hold down Command, Option, P, and R for parameter RAM, it used to be called, and you restart when you restart your Mac, and then you go through the second startup chime, and stuff is cleared. Okay, so this is a troubleshooting step that you sometimes need to do to solve certain problems. One of the pieces of information that is stored in non-volatile RAM is the name of your startup disk. So that's a piece of information your Mac needs to know before it is loaded OS 10, right? Which disk do I look on to find OS 10? You might have several of them. So if you clear your non-volatile RAM, you could get into a situation in which you start up your Mac and it's like, well, I don't know, I see a bunch of startup disks here. I wonder which one I should choose. And it takes a while to make that decision. So ironically, this procedure, which some people perceive as speeding up your Mac, can, in some situations, have the effect of slowing down reboots because your Mac now takes longer to do something that it didn't have to think about before. So there are kind of a lot of examples of that where well-meaning people who have discovered one particular instance in which a procedure helps them now have generalized this, and the generalization sort of fails because it often causes more problems than it solves.
And I don't want to leave folks hanging with that. Am I correct in saying that once you do get your Mac to boot from the correct disk, well, from any disk, then you can reset your startup disk?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay.
It's not a bad idea to go into System Preferences, go to the Startup Disk pane, and make sure that the disk you want to start up from is selected. If it is, then great. If nothing is selected, which sometimes happens, then just select it, close the window, and you're good.
Yeah. I've actually had that problem when I was booting from an external disk for some reason and then shut down, didn't think about resetting the startup disk, yanked the external disk connector out, and then go to start, and it's like, what's wrong? Oh my gosh, and then all of a sudden it kind of catches and takes off. But
yep,
that's exactly
that's how it works.
Yeah, that's what. All of a sudden I opened up startup disk and it's like there's nothing selected. How can that be? Well, there you go.
Yeah. So I'm just looking over my list of what's new in this book, because the Take Control of Speeding Up Your Mac was last updated in 2012. And wow, a lot has happened since then. So I have basically about 2 pages of changes. And, a lot of it is just sort of bring the book up to date with El Capitan and, totally new version of disk utility, revisions to Activity Monitor, stuff like that. A lot of the apps that I mentioned before either no longer exist or haven't been updated or have changed in some, particular way. And there are also sort of some new realities that some of us have to cope with. So back in 2012, USB 3 was not, well, I guess USB 3 had come about, but USB 3.1 did not, and USB-C connectors and Thunderbolt 3 had not started appearing anywhere, and SSDs had not taken as strong of a hold as they have today. And there's sort of a whole long list of other things that have just happened in the world. They've happened with the PC industry, they've happened with Apple, they've happened with particular hardware. I'll make the statements like, all portable Macs can do such and such. Oh, but the MacBook with Retina display can't. Okay, or something like that. So I've just gone through everything in the book and fixed all of those problems. And I can't really say I have future-proofed it, because I am aware of some things that are going to happen in Sierra that will require another update to the book. But I think the smart thing to do is to wait until Sierra ships and then release another small update to all of my books that will cover just those new things. I have a feeling that some things are going to change between now and when Sierra is final.
I can't believe that it's been that long since we talked about Take Control of Speeding Up Your Mac. That's kind of amazing. And when you think about the time between now and then, how SSDs have come down in price. I mean, how many things that have happened that give you some of the speed that we crave. That's just wow.
in some of my books, I make these statements like, oh, and since the last time I updated this book, you can now buy a 1 terabyte drive for as little as $200 or something, and Costco is regularly selling 4 terabyte backup drives for like $100. So,
it's crazy.
Things really change.
Yeah. Let's if it's okay, let's shift on to the updates for the other books, because I might want to make sure we give them time and we don't run out of time.
Yeah.
So we have the first one, I guess, since we already touched on it, is maintaining your Mac, a Joe on Tech guide.
Yeah. So for maintaining your Mac and for troubleshooting your Mac, both have now been updated. Maintaining is at version 1.1. Which is a moderate update, and troubleshooting is at 1.0.1, which is sort of like a bug fix level update. So I'll kind of talk about these two together. Maintaining was the second the second Joe on Tech book to come out, and really the big problem with maintaining in its current or its previous form. So I'm just going over here to my list of what's changed, is that it didn't cover El Capitan, and now it does. So all the stuff, disk utility and stuff that has changed. There are a few other small things. One of the things that I was a little bit embarrassed to notice was that, and I should have picked this up when I was converting the book from the Take Control version to my version, but I didn't, was that actually back in Mavericks, OS X changed the way RAM is handled. So it used to be that there were these 4 different categories. There's like active and wired and inactive and so forth. And now we have compressed RAM. And so the different categories of how your memory is being used are totally different in Activity Monitor. And this is all good because, long story short, you can now do more with less physical RAM. So that's fantastic. But the book didn't really explain that before, and now it does. So I do that. I talk about some new utilities and make a few other corrections. And I have also in all of these books adopted the name macOS. So I figure that might as well start making that change as soon as possible, because we're all going to have to get used to it. So where it is appropriate, I say macOS instead of OS X, and maybe this will seem trivial or uninteresting to 99% of your audience, but it's interesting to me. On all of my sites, on joeontech.net and joekissell.com and alt.cc and all those, I'm now using HTTPS. So they all have SSL certificates now, and so I've changed all the links in all the books that point to those sites to use HTTPS, because encryption everywhere. So it's a big deal. It has very little visible impact to most end users most of the time, but for those of you who care about encryption, SSL everywhere. So that's basically, and in troubleshooting, let me look at that change list here. Just there were a couple of little errors besides the things I just mentioned. A couple of little errors, like one of the troubleshooting steps was like what you do if printing doesn't work. And there was a link broken only in the printed version of troubleshooting your Mac in that section, which the irony is just too much for me. So the books are available printed and also in ebook format, and the print version had a wrong link in the printing doesn't work topic. Anyway, I fixed that. So these are both fairly minor updates, but the thing to be aware of is that they're now current. They are current as of June 2016, and they will be slightly less current in September, October, whenever Sierra comes out. But don't worry, there will be free updates to these right after that will address any new things with Sierra that people need to know about. So that's maintaining and troubleshooting.
It's probably worth saying, too, that it would not make a lot of sense for you to try to update these books for Sierra yet, because we don't even have a public beta yet. So,
right.
And Apple it's not unheard of to have Apple add features and pull features at the last minute because the beta didn't go so well or it went really spectacularly. So
yes, I have been through this many times, and I've seen things change at the last minute. Things, oh, that checkbox has gone from system preferences, or oh, there's a new button in this app or whatever. And so I have the developer preview installed. I've looked at it. I am aware of the coming changes, and some of them are going to affect maintaining, troubleshooting, speeding up, like this new optimized storage feature, which, if you turn it on, will be able to selectively move certain old large files from your disk to the cloud. A lot of people think that sounds kind of scary. I'm one of them, but it needs to be talked about because it can have an effect on all these topics, really including backups. In fact, it's actually going to have a really big effect on backups now that I think about it. So anyway, that will be discussed, and Siri doesn't matter for these books. Most of the flat maps and all that stuff doesn't matter for these books, but certainly anything that's affecting what's on your disk will definitely be discussed in an update.
So that leaves, and you already did the segue for me. That leaves take control of backing up your Mac, a Joe on Tech Guide.
It's all good. I'm drinking from my Take Control mug, and as soon as I get done, I have a long to-do list, but certainly a few of the things on today's to-do list involve writing new Take Control books. So I make the mistake myself. I live in these two worlds. So
and also it's been a transition. I mean, because as you said at the outset, you adopted these books, so they really are sort of a continuation, and you just got to figure that now they're flying a new flag.
Right. At some future date, I hesitate to make forward-looking statements because the universe always proves me wrong. But I expect, hope, plan that there will be new Joe on Tech books that do not come from a Take Control past, that are brand new from scratch, out of purely in this new realm. They don't exist yet, and I have a number of things that have to happen before they can exist, so we'll get to that when the time comes. And you know me, I can rarely write more than one book a month. So
that's a shame, Joe.
I know.
a book a month. Take control I did it again. Backing up your Mac, a Joe on Tech Guide.
Backing up your Mac.
Yeah.
So this is the funny thing about this book. So this book this was, I think, I don't know, the second or third Take Control book I wrote way back when. I think the first version came out in 2004. And this book has gone through many different versions, many editions, many different titles. At one point, we decided to split it into two books, one that was sort of a simplified version that covered Time Machine and one that was more advanced. And then later, those two versions merged back into one, and we had stuff that was cut out and put online, and I had just morphed in all these different ways. But over the years, as I have updated this text many times, sometimes it's like a year has gone by, and I look at what's changed, and like, yeah, I guess I could do a little update. A couple of things have changed, but it's really not worth it. And then sometimes a year goes by, I'm like, whoa, I cannot believe how much is different all of a sudden. And, a year ago, when the first Joe on Tech version of Backing Up Your Mac came out, I sort of thought it would have a really long shelf life. I thought, well, what's really going to change in the world of backups? I think this book will still be fine years from now. But funny story, as I went to update this book, which I thought, going in, I thought this was going to be like a version 1.1. But then my list kept getting longer and longer and longer, and I'm looking at this list and all these things that have changed, and I'm like, wow, this is big. This is definitely second edition territory. A lot of stuff has changed in the last year. So the book has changed to keep up with it, and it may seem surprising. I mean, yeah. So the stuff about El Capitan and disk utility and all that, obviously that goes on the list because that didn't exist a year ago. You may think, well, OS 10 still looks pretty much the same. Time Machine is basically the same. No major changes there. But there's still a lot of stuff. So a lot has changed in the world of cloud storage. A lot has changed with third-party apps. Readers have written to me saying, good book, but I sure wish it talked about this, and I sure wish it talked about that, and have given me suggestions or said, pretty please, could you talk about this? So I have dealt with some of those things. For example, some people wanted to hear about iOS backups, and this is a book about the Mac, but still, lots and lots of Mac users have iOS devices, and there are some interrelationships. I mean, if you back up your iOS device to your Mac, then that's going to affect how much storage is taken up on your Mac and backups of your Mac. So I now have a little section talking about iOS backups. And some people said, well, it's great that you talk about how to back up all your stuff, but sort of foreshadowing this optimized storage feature in Sierra, wouldn't it be great if you didn't have so much stuff that you needed to back up in the first place? You talk about that in maintaining. I do, but maybe if you had add a little section on clearing away things you don't really need in the first place, that will also have a beneficial effect on your backup. So stuff like that. A bunch of things that readers asked for. As I always do, I have a little section in the book that's like what's new in the last year. So if you already have a backup system going, you like it, you're happy with it, that's super. You don't have to read the whole book again. Just read this little section, and it will point out new things that you might want to be aware of, new services, apps, pricing changes, new features, just stuff that might affect your planning in the future. A big thing now. So two sort of related things: RAIDs and NASs. So a lot of people wanted more information and more advice on using RAIDs, mostly using them as a destination for backups, but also if you have stuff that's stored in a RAID, you're going to have to back that up someplace else. So RAIDs are becoming increasingly popular. It's really great that you can put a box on your desk and put 2 or 3 or 4 hard drives in it, and all of a sudden have massive capacity and or speed, especially if you're doing stuff like editing 4K video or things that really take up massive amounts of disk space. That's great, but now there are backup implications too. So how do you deal with those? And a number of people have asked me, well, what's the story about NAS devices? So a network attached storage device, basically a hard drive in a box with a network interface and some sort of minimal computing power. There are lots of these. There are some, like the Apple's time capsule could be considered a primitive form of a NAS, but a lot of them are much more sophisticated. They have basically full Linux computers in there. A lot of people use them as media servers. A lot of people use them as backup destinations. So you have one of these boxes somewhere in your house. It has a disk or 2 or 3 and has a little computer in it, and you put all of your photos there, all your music, all your movies. And now wait a minute, this is all valuable data, and it's only on this box that's in this closet in the other room. Do I need to back that up too? How do I do that? Well, it's complicated, but I talk about how you do that. So, I talk about sort of, one of the other changes that took place both in the Finder and in Disk Utility in El Capitan was the loss of the secure erase and the secure empty trash feature. So for people who need to do that, I talk a bit about that. So anyway, these are just a few of many, many new things in the book. But as it turns out, quite a lot has happened in the world of backups in the last year, and there are some things that you may want to know about and consider some changes, even if you were happy before. But particularly if you've acquired new hardware like a RAID or a NAS, or are thinking about doing so, this is the stuff you got to think about.
Every time we talk about the upgrades to the books, whether they're the Take Control books or the Joe on Tech books, I'm really struck that I guess you kind of plant a flag in time and then look back and say what has changed since then. And a lot of us don't. A lot of us, it just sort of evolves. And you start engaging in practices or implementing products or services, and you really kind of thought, okay, this was my goal to do this, but I forgot about the implications for backups or for storage or for troubleshooting or whatever. And so this just, I mean, these books, both Joe on Tech and Take Control, they just strike me as such an invaluable thing to stay up to date, be reminded, get procedures, all of those things rolled into one. And I really mean that because it's so easy to overlook. I mean, you're sitting there saying about NAS devices. Well, there's a Drobo sitting there that's a NAS. And, some of the things you mentioned, it's like, I don't think I've taken care of that yet.
Right.
So thank you.
These things creep up on you. And it's not, it's not just in this sort of like maintenance and backup world too. It's with everything. I was talking to user group on Saturday about passwords in general and 1Password in particular. And, people were saying, well, I keep all my passwords in a spreadsheet. And that might have sort of been okay 10 years ago. If you only have a dozen passwords or whatever, I can see that. But then you're going to add a new one and a new one and a new one. And at a certain point, you're going to go, what worked a year ago or 2 years ago is starting to not work so well now. And the same is true with everything. You get into habits and you make choices for totally sensible, reasonable reasons at the beginning, but as stuff changes or you accumulate more data or whatever it is, they don't always continue making sense. And so I recommend once a year or so you look at this stuff like backups and say, all right, well, let's just step back and see if the things that made sense a year ago still make sense. If they do, great, done. If they don't, better to get ahead of it now than to encounter bigger problems later on.
Agreed. So run us down the specifics of the books, if you would, the pricing and upgrade policies and all that stuff. Yeah.
So let's talk about the updates first. The second edition of Backing Up Your Mac, version 1.1 of Maintaining Your Mac, 1.0.1 of Troubleshooting Your Mac. These are all free updates. So if you had the earlier version, there is a link on the next to last page of the book, the Check for Updates link. You click that and you will have information on how to download the new versions. Also, you should have received an email from me about that, but if for any reason you didn't get it, click the link in the book. So all these are free updates and worth every penny. Then, speeding up your Mac is currently $9.99. Now, I'm describing this as an introductory price. When I started the Joe on Tech series, I did some investigation and some calculation. I decided, for reasons, that I thought it would be a good idea if all the books were $10, $9.99. So I set the prices at $9.99. And Adam and Tanya kind of said, really? Because the Take Control versions of these books were either $15 or $20 each. And some of them are quite long books. And they obviously took a lot of time and work and energy. And they were surprised that I was offering them so cheaply. My story is basically I'm sort of starting a new business in a sense. I'm starting this new series of books. I want to attract an audience. I want to make the the books as easy for people to buy as possible. But prices will at some point go up. I cannot yet say exactly when that will happen or to what new price they will rise, but the prices will have to go up. So this would be a really good time to stock up on Joe on Tech books. They're $10 each, or four for only $40. So this is so four for $39.96. Or whatever. Anyway, so the prices will be going up, and that's not to say there might not be other kinds of special deals in the future, but do think of these as introductory prices, and I encourage everyone to take advantage of them sooner rather than later.
And with all that, the website where they can go and take advantage of those prices is joeontech.net. So if you go to joeontech.net/books, there is a page that has all 4 titles at the top, and underneath there are a bunch of my Take Control books as well. I'm going to make a little recommendation here. Someone wrote to me yesterday who was very upset because she went to this page, tried to buy one of the Joe on Tech books, but also tried to buy one of the Take Control books that was listed below, and was confused and frustrated because I put your book in my shopping cart, but then I clicked on this other book, and now it's in a different shopping cart. And why? Okay, there are 2 different companies, 2 different stores. So you can buy Joe on Tech books from me. You cannot buy Take Control books from me. You can buy either one of them from Take Control. You can only buy Joe on Tech, or you can only buy the Joe on Tech books from me, not the Take Control books. So just be mindful of that. They are 2 different companies and 2 different stores, and we both appreciate your business, but go to the right place for the right thing. 2 different stores, same great author. And I say this about your books and about the Take Control books. I don't know any set of authors that do more research, more work, and condense it down to a more usable form than you all. So, and I know these books are exactly the same. So thank you for all your efforts.
And thank you for all the publicity.
Hey, it's always my pleasure, Joe. Now, by my calendar, we're almost at the end of the month. So should the speeding up of your MacBook be considered the June book or the July book, since you only write one a month?
Well, yeah, let's call it the June book.
Okay.
Let's see. Will there be more book? Well, I don't. Well, I'm not actually sure. We'll have to see how certain things play out. I suspect that the next book won't be until August, but I have been wrong before.
Well, that's okay. I mean, it's summertime, so you can take a little bit of a break and just do, only part of a book a month. How's that?
Gee, thanks.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Joe, it's absolutely great to see you. Thanks so much, and you're welcome back as soon as we have something else to talk about, or anytime.
Awesome.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. We're glad you're here listening to Joe and I banter back and forth because we have so much fun doing these interviews. Hopefully we share some good information as well. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes, links to subscribe, and to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, SoundCloud, the MacVoices blog, the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter, and on MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard that helps you do more with your Apple tech. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.